ज्ञानाञ्जना शलाकया चक्षुरुमिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुक्तपदकमलं श्रीगुरु वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथं वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदं सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितं च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna. Thank you for playing Mridanga. So, this is the most auspicious, wonderful, blissful Kartik month. So many wonderful festivals are taking place during this month, and we have the wonderful benefit of being able to recite Sri Damodarastakam and offering ghee lamp to the Supreme Lord Sri Damodar. And offering a lamp during this month of Kartik is most beneficial for us, because we may have done and accumulated so many past karmic reactions, millions and millions of lifetimes. But with the lighting and offering of a single lamp, one can vanquish the ashes. And we sometimes wonder why we are offering a light to the Lord. Right? The Lord is the source of all light. Right? From His form emanates the Brahma Jyotir, which is the source of all light. The light within this planet, within this universe, comes from the Supreme Lord. So the Lord actually is not in need of any lamp. In the olden days, you would use a lamp to illuminate something, right? Because there was no power. So you would hold a lamp and you would sort of, to show, that's how you would show a lamp. So when we are offering a lamp to the Lord, what is the significance, the Lord being the source of all light? Well, this lamp that we are offering to the Lord, it's a symbol of our love, of our devotion to the Supreme Lord. Because the Lord is actually, He is self-satisfied. He has everything. We are always in want, right? That is why we have always some lamentation. But if you had everything, then there would be no lamentation. So the Lord is in full bliss. But there's one thing he is always aching for, so eager to have. And what is that thing that he is so eager to taste?
The love of his devotees.
The love of his devotees. So eager to taste the love of his devotees. And so he makes and marks this very auspicious opportunity for us to offer our love through the lighting of a lamp. It is just not a ritual of lighting a lamp. It is an offering of our heart to the Supreme Lord. And the Lord so lovingly and wonderfully is waiting to relish it. No matter how imperfect or even perfect we may be, just as a father and mother, they accept the offering of their child, a card, some craft, something they made. It's so pleasing to that mother and father. But are they really in need of that object? No. What are they in want of? The thought that went into that offering. And that is what pleases the mother and father. So similarly, what pleases Krishna is not the object of our offering, but it is the emotion that goes into it, the love that we offer with it. And that is what we see when we read Damodar Astakam. This song is so beautiful, but the translation is very powerful. And it clues us in to the mood of devotion that we are trying to awaken, particularly during this month of Damodar. So we'll discuss a little bit today from Bhagavad Gita. And we'll also read the translations from Damodar Astakam, and then we'll sing and offer light. Is that okay? And maybe, time permitting, we'll discuss a little bit about Narottam Das Thakur. His disappearance day was yesterday. So we've been reading from chapter 13. And the title of the chapter is The Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And we read a combination of 5 verses 8 through 12 of this chapter. And it spoke about the processes of acquiring knowledge. So we know that knowledge is very powerful. And we say knowledge has power. And we have different degrees of knowledge. We utilize knowledge in the world around us, in our professional realm. The more knowledge we have about our field of expertise, the more we can advance in our career. So that knowledge has the power to do something. And if I have, knowledge about, some future trend coming in the world, I can, design some business enterprise to take advantage of that and make money. So there's power that is coming from that knowledge. But ultimately, the goal of all knowledge is to find happiness. Right? Is there any other reason we like to acquire knowledge? Even if we're just trying to satisfy our curiosity, ultimately is to find some satisfaction, some peace and happiness. Right? So Krishna, in these prior 5 verses, has spoken about the different processes to acquire knowledge. But he's speaking about transcendental knowledge. Because transcendental knowledge, meaning knowledge about spirit, which goes beyond the realm of matter, that can yield permanent, eternal, one and the same, and unlimited happiness. That is the goal of all knowledge. So we can qualify or characterize the potency of knowledge by the magnitude or the amount of result that manifests from it. So Krishna has explained now these different processes in the prior 5 verses, and he speaks about one should be humble, one should be steady, and many different qualities he gave. And he ultimately said this knowledge should culminate in devotional service. So now in the 13th verse, Krishna is speaking about the knowable. So what knowledge does one gain specifically? He is now going to explain, after talking about the process to acquire knowledge. Now what is that knowledge? He is explaining in the coming verses. So So let's read verse 13 in the purport, and then we'll discuss it. Somebody would like to read the verse?
I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world.
So let's read the purport.
The Lord has explained the field of activities and the knower of the field. He has also explained the process of knowing the knower of the field of activities. Now he begins to explain the knowable, first the soul and then the supersoul. By knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the supersoul, one can relish the nectar of life. As explained in the second chapter, the living entity is eternal. This is also confined here. There is no specific date at which the jiva was born, nor can anyone trace out the history of the jivatma's manifestation from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it is the beginningless. The Vedic literature confirms this. Najayate nirjate this.
Perfect.
Okay.
Very good.
The knower of the body is never born and never dies, and he is full of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord as a super soul is also stated in the Vedic literature Shvetashvatara Upanishad to be Pradhana Kshetragya Patir Gunesha, the chief knower of the body and the master of three modes of material nature. In the Smriti it is said, Dasa Bhuto Harir Eva Nansya Syaiva Kadachana, also confirmed by Lord Chaitanya and his teachings. Therefore, I missed. The living entities are eternally in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed by Lord Chaitanya in his teachings. Therefore, the description of Brahman mentioned in this verse is in relation to the individual soul. And when the word Brahman is applied to the living entity, it is to be understood that he is Vijnana Brahma, as opposed to Danda Brahma. Ananda Brahma is the supreme Brahman personality of Godhead.
Okay. So this verse has some, words that we have to kind of dissect and pull apart a little bit to understand it. I shall explain the knowable. Right? So this knowable is what is to be known that can really achieve, again, that ultimate goal of life. So Prabhupada writes a very beautiful statement. He says, this is 4 lines into the purport, by knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the supersoul, one can relish the nectar of life. It's a very interesting statement, because isn't the whole world seeking to relish the nectar of life? Right? And we see how many varieties of activities are in pursuit of trying to relish the nectar of life. Right? How many different, foodstuffs people have created to try to relish the enjoyment of the tongue. How many types of cinema movies and different forms of entertainment and different activities, sporting activities and this and that, all of it geared at social settings and to relish the nectar of life. And this COVID situation has certainly put such a damper on the ability to relish so many of the material aspects of life. Right? And so we're seeing great upheaval in the emotional sanctity of our society, because these things that were to be the so-called object of life have been taken away. So, but Prabhupada is guiding us here in the purport by knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the super soul, one can relish the nectar of life. So let's break apart that a little bit. So Krishna is saying, I'm going to explain what is really to be known. Right? And in that line I read from the purport, there are two knowers that we must understand. Who are the two knowers?
The soul and the super soul.
The soul and the super soul. Right? So, in the first line of the paragraph, Prabhupada is saying that the Lord has explained the field of activities. Right? So the field of activities is his body. Right? This material body. It's made up of earth, air, fire, water, ether. It's all these material elements, right? You get a multivitamin. What do you see? All of these elements. So where do they come from? Earth. Right? Potassium and calcium and magnesium and all these different things. Right? So our body is made up of all these materials. Right? So that Krishna has said that is the field from which one can use that to cultivate different activities. Just like if you have a field of land, you can plant different crops and from that get different types of foodstuffs. Right? So he said that is the kshetra. But separate from the field is the person within, right? Which we know from all the way going back to chapter 2. Krishna said, you are not this body, you are?
Spirit soul.
Spirit soul. Right? So, one of the knowers is the spirit soul. Just like the farmer knows, I am not the field, but I am the farmer performing activities on the field. Okay? So one in knowledge similarly knows, I am not this body, but I am spirit soul residing within this body, performing different activities. Okay? But is knowing I am spirit soul sufficient and conclusive to know the ability to relish the nectar of life? Is that why not?
You have to know both.
Both what?
The soul, the knower, and the knowable, or the soul,
The
and
soul
the super
and
soul.
the-
Super soul.
I have to know both, right? So I have to know that I am spirit soul, but I also have to understand what is my relationship to everything around me, right? And ultimately that relationship is with the super soul. Right? Of course, the super soul is, the kind of second level of realizing ultimately Krishna. Okay? So Krishna is going to speak in the coming verse about the super soul. Right? He's going to say, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, head, and faces, and ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So that is what he's explaining about in terms of the super soul. But back to this verse. So he's saying that if you know this soul and super soul, you will taste the eternal. What do you think Krishna means by that? What does Krishna mean, taste the eternal?
Like the higher taste that you get
Okay.
beyond like material taste.
Non-material taste. Why do we think it's non-material?
Because material is temporary and this is eternal.
Anything in the material world is eternal? And everything has a beginning and an end. Right? So the only eternal realm is in the spiritual world. So Krishna is saying, if you know this knowable, you'll be able to taste. What Krishna means is relish, enjoy the bliss of the eternal spiritual world. Okay? So the processes of knowledge he explained in the prior 5 verses, the result of acquiring knowledge is happiness. It's happiness and peace. That is the result of acquiring knowledge. But we have to acquire the right knowledge. Because we know one thing. Having knowledge of how to manipulate matter in whatever way we want, has it led to eternal happiness? Ever? In the history of human race? Billions of people have walked this planet. And by simply manipulating matter, how many different varieties of ways have we attempted to manipulate matter? One or two ways? Endless. But it's never resulted in eternal bliss and happiness. So Krishna is saying here, this is the means to taste the real happiness. Right? Come to know the knowable, which is understanding I am spirit, soul, and who is Krishna. Right? So we say all of this whole Bhagavad Gita, you can summarize into three things. Who am I? Who is Krishna? And what is my relationship? Right? So what is my relationship? What is the relationship between the soul and the super soul? What is the relationship?
It's a loving relationship.
Hmm?
Loving relationship.
Loving relationship. Right.
Eternal, spiritual, non-material.
It's the eternal relationship, right? So Krishna has said that the spirit is beginningless. We can't even conceive beginningless, right? I have to appear at, well, it has to be some start, because everything in the material world has a beginning and an end. But Krishna says the soul is beginningless. So it's love, beginningless. What else? What else is the relationship between the soul and the super soul?
Servant.
Hmm?
Servant.
Servant? Who is servant to who?
Soul serves the super soul.
So Krishna says, subordinate to me. Right? Subordinate, he says beginningless and subordinate to me. So he's explaining what is the position of the spirit soul. It is eternal, beginningless, but it is also a servant. A servant to the super soul. And herein lies the delineation between success and lack of success, right there. To the extent we accept this position, that we are eternally the servants of the super soul of Krishna, things become very sweet. And as soon as we try to act in denial of that, there's frustration. Just like in a mundane example here, if I try to live in denial of the law of gravity, I don't believe gravity exists. It doesn't exist. No, it doesn't. Will I be happy living in denial of gravity? My whole life, I can try to deny that fact. But will I have any success? Because whether I accept it or not, it's a fact. Right? Kind of a crude example. When I choose to accept the fact that I am the eternal servant of Krishna, one experiences clarity of purpose in life and bliss. But when we choose not to, what do we experience?
Struggle.
And we have our own personal experience with that, and we have it observed around. It is a fact. And whose choice is it? And which, whether we'll act in this relationship or not, whose choice is it? Ours. Right? Krishna will never impose his will upon us. So in as much as a fish out of water will never find happiness. No matter what you do with the fish, you can give it everything. You can give it the world's riches. You can glorify it and make it the most famous fish in the world. You can do all. But if it's out of water, it will not be happy. No matter, it's out of its natural element. So similarly, this Brahman, this spirit, which is beginningless, is always subordinate to Krishna. And when we render service to Krishna, then the spirit soul finds its real nature. Just as a fish, when it's in the water, finds its natural element. Now, when we hear subordinate to me, what is some initial reaction or feeling emotion we get? Do we like it?
No.
We don't like it, right? So let's explore that. Why don't we like it?
You have no control, or
So we have control, yeah?
It's like a feeling of like extreme inferiority.
It's a feeling of inferiority, right? I'm weak, right? I can't do something, right? Yeah?
It involves trust, and trust is scary.
Ooh, I like that. It involves trust. And trust is scary because who we give that trust to may or may not be responsible with it. Right? That's what makes it scary. An infant gives its trust to mother when the mother is holding the baby, right? If mother drops the baby, what happens? Not good. Let's not even think about it. But the infant has full trust in mother, right? Because the relationship is so pure. But those relationships are far and few between in the material world as we grow up, right? We don't have that depth of relationship, so trust. Right? Any other reasons why when we think subordinate, there's an uneasy feeling? It's natural. In the material world, when there is superior and subordinate, it is most often, you can almost say always, a relationship of exploitation, where the strong exploits the weak, right? Where the trusted is abuses the position of trust, right? And that's the nature of the material world. And why? Because there's a selfish, self-serving nature that we all have. So in relationships, it's about what I can get out of it. And so if I have a position of strength, I will look to utilize that for my gain and someone else's loss. Right? That's the nature of the material world. So as soon as we hear subordinate, it creates some discomfort. But what we see with Krishna, like everything in the material world, in the spiritual world, it's the exact opposite. Just like if you look in a pond, you'll see a tree in that pond. But that tree is upside down, right? Because it's reflecting the tree that's at the edge of that pond. But when you look, I was just driving home today, and there was a beautiful reflection of colored trees in the water. It was very beautiful. And I just thought, oh, all those trees are upside down. But are the trees upside down? No, the reflection. So the material world is like that. It is a reflection of the reality, which is the spiritual world. So the subordinate positions we experience in the material world, which largely revolves around this exploitative, one taking advantage of another relationship, is the exact opposite in the spiritual world. So in the spiritual world, the subordinate is serving the superior, in that case Krishna. But who is the beneficiary of that service? We are. When we go to the office and we work for the boss, who is the beneficiary, the ultimate beneficiary of our labor? The boss. We get something back, but the bigger beneficiary is the company. That's service in the material world. But in the spiritual world, it's the exact opposite. And we have no greater proof of that than our Damodar Leela. When Mother Yashoda is in her service, she is physically churning yogurt into butter. Right? Now we just plop it into the Vitamix. There's kid my wife. I'm like, how come you don't do like Mother Yashoda? It's hard labor, right? She was perspiring and hard work, right? But who was she doing that for? Krishna. She was acting, though in a motherly relationship, in service to Krishna. Now Krishna responds in that pastime. He's the supreme controller. Not even a blade of grass can move in the wind without the sanction of the Lord. That's how extreme his control is. And we all want to be the supreme controller, right? There's this big fight right now about who gets to control this country, right? But they have no control. We can't even control the growth of our fingernail. Yet we want to try to clamor for this control. But Krishna's control is supreme and unequivocal. Yet when Mother Yashoda is acting in her subordinate relationship to Krishna in rendering service, he is so pleased by that he allows Mother Yashoda to bind him, to capture him, to even scold him. Now this is kind of beyond that. It's hard to comprehend. Right? But in the spiritual world, we see, in the spiritual relationships, that Krishna, he reciprocates with that service, with that mood of subordinate service, far in excess of whatever service we give. So whatever few steps we take, Krishna takes many, many, many steps more back to us. But in the material world, it's the exact opposite. Whatever I give, I get a small portion back. If you study, corporate incentive compensation models, right? It'll be like, okay, whatever value, you should give 1 to 3% back to the employee. Well, who's getting the other 99 to 97%? Someone else, right? So, but in the case of Krishna, we give 1 or 2%, and Krishna gives many, many times more. So this subordinate position, yes, it has this distaste in our material realm. But as we read and experience all the relationships Krishna has with his devotees, we see actually his devotees are always the winners. They're always the ones enjoying. Krishna has only one purpose. He says, I have only one purpose in the spiritual world. And what is that? What is the one purpose he says he has in the spiritual world?
To please his devotees.
To please his devotees. We think, wait a minute, Krishna's sitting there and everybody's serving him, master, servant, and it's there's one-way street, and only Krishna's enjoying and everybody else is servant, right? That's like, when we see this subordinate, we're eternal servant, those thoughts come in. But actually Krishna's only purpose is to give pleasure to his devotees. If Mother Yashoda wants to bind him, he'll be bound. If his cowherd boyfriends and want to play in the rivers, Krishna will play in the rivers with them. If they want to wrestle with him, they'll wrestle with him. Whatever gives pleasure to his devotees, Krishna is willing to do. So much so, he's even willing to be the driver of Arjuna in this battlefield. The most public of forums, Krishna is willing to surrender his position, his fame, and take a very relatively low position, driver, because of his love for his devotees. So this subordinate position to Krishna, it is truly the only means to relish the nectar of life. And we have to, understand that our material conditioning leads us to resist that sentiment due to the distasteful experience we have in the material world around being subordinate. But actually, to be in the loving service of Krishna, it is the most blissful place to be. And that is what Krishna is going to be explaining now in these verses. That if we understand my position as eternal servant of Krishna, then I'll find this bliss and happiness. But if I try to resist, then I'll experience the material world. And that is our choice. And right now we are experiencing what is the material world. It's a tumultuous place. Right? This is 1 year ago, you could have imagined a situation like this. We had so many plans to try to enjoy the material world in so many different ways. So many different plans. All, yet we think, no, I am the controller. I am the independent doer. I can carve my own destiny. We have some freedom. But understanding this relationship between the soul and the supersoul ultimately is the key to unlocking bliss and happiness. And just remember this subordinate position. The winner, the true recipient of the bliss and happiness is the actual servant. Exact opposite of what we experience here in the material world. And that's what we see in this Damodar Lila. Any comments or questions on this verse before we move on? Any discussion? So we're ready to be subordinate to Krishna? It's not so easy. Right? But by good chanting and understanding, we'll see. Actually, Krishna, he finds something very mysterious to him. He cannot comprehend the magnitude of the happiness of his devotees. Now that statement in and of itself is peculiar. How Krishna, the Supreme Lord, cannot comprehend something. He is the Supreme Intelligent. Right? He is a possessor of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. He is the source of everything. But when he sees his devotee experiencing so much bliss and happiness, he can't comprehend it. He can't understand how much happiness his devotee has. So much so that he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to try to understand the supreme and extraordinary bliss that the devotee has in this mood of service. Just gives us a glimpse into the power of devotional service. So cool. Yes, it can bind Krishna. It even is beyond the grasp of the Supreme Lord himself. And so he comes to experience it. That's how wonderful devotional service is. So we just have to try it. And by lighting lamps, by chanting the holy names, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, rendering service, that taste will slowly emerge and come piece by piece. Okay?
I had a question.
Yes, please.
And I don't want to open up a theological can of worms here, but there's in a purport, Prabhupada talks about the jiva being uncreated, and it says in the beginning, never there was a time where I nor you nor everyone didn't exist, and I don't know, I have a kind of a Christian background, and so I was actually had an argument with a Christian friend of mine the other day of it's kind of hard for us to conceive of the soul being uncreated, separate from God, and it kind of raises this question. Elsewhere, Prabhupada talks about going back home, back to Godhead. That's the whole kind of that phrase quite a lot. But also there's this indication that when you enter the spiritual world, that's eternal and you can't fall down, so to speak. And so I don't know. Did you have a take on that kind of balance?
Yeah. So a couple of things you're getting at. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita repeatedly, from 8th chapter all the way to the end, he says, once you return to my eternal abode, you'll never return. You'll never return. You'll never return. So how we got here in the first place, right? That is a very common question. And a lot our acharyas have commented on this quite a bit. Prabhupada has spoken about it. He speaks about it in one level, which he says, don't rack your brain trying to figure out how it happened. Rack your brain trying to figure out how to undo it. Because you actually can't understand it. So trying to diagnose exactly what happened and why I fell from the material world, or from the spiritual world, we'll never be able to trace back what happened. So instead of trying to, and he would give the example, instead of trying to understand how I got the disease, cure the disease. Right? So that's his broad statement. So, because you, like the idea to your first point, how do we understand that we're uncreated? Right? So, we cannot understand eternity. We can't. We just have to accept that. Because our material intelligence is built around a beginning and end. So on the same point we are beginningless, but at the same point we are part and parcel of Krishna, which means we are separated expansions from Krishna, which implies at one point we were not, but we were, and that's something we just have to accept. Our material intelligence will never be able to comprehend. Spiritually, yes, we'll comprehend. So we can at least accept the fact that we've always existed, as Krishna said in the 12th verse of the 2nd chapter, which you were quoting. Never was a time that I did not exist, nor you. Never in the future shall either of us cease to be. Right? So that fact we accept. Now, in the spiritual world, there is still free will. So free will is never subjugated. That free will is never taken away from the living entity. So in the free world, and Krishna explains in the 7th chapter, that Icha and Dvesha, these two things, we had a desire. And that desire led to some envy or hatred. Of who? Krishna. We had some desire to try to enjoy separate from Krishna. And thus, Krishna said, well, you can try, you can experience the material world. It's an illusory separation from me because I am present everywhere, either in my apara shakti, but you can try. And thus, the living entity fell, all of us. But we are in a vast minority. Most living entities never come to the material world. Most living entities are eternally in the spiritual world. So we are in a minority. We, for whatever reason, now we'll try to ask the question, how we got that desire in the perfected spiritual world, right? That's where those things come. And we have to understand, and again, based on the commentary of our acharyas, that because of that free will, there's always that potential. Even in the midst of perfection, there's always that potential. Now, then, how we can be assured we will go back to spiritual world, we won't do it again. Right? How we can be assured. So, Prabhupada would give the example that, not this specific example, but the point is, when you've made a mistake and you've been burned by it, you won't do it again. So once you've tasted the material world, that will stay with us forever and realize this is not a thing. And just like a child sees a pot of boiling water, those bubbles look fun. Mother says, don't touch it, it's hot. Child sees bubbles. Child touches the water. What happens? Not good. Burn. Will child ever again touch that water? No. It only took once. Never again. So similarly, our taste of this material world, it only takes once. And once we have tasted and understood it, that's why Krishna said with confidence, don't worry. Once you go back and you experience the bliss, you'll never want to again try to be separate from me. So that's how we understand a few of those different components. So we have to have some humility ultimately to accept certain things we cannot process with our limited intelligence. We can't. Because we're trying to understand something beyond our scope of reference. Right? Like when we see Krishna is lifting this mountain here, right? And he's lifting it with his left hand and his left finger. Not even his left finger, his left fingernail. And he did so for 7 days. Immediately think, That's a nice story. Why? Because I can't do that. Because I can't even lift this book for 7 hours. And certainly someone can't lift a mountain for 7 days, right? So we use our frame of reference to try to extrapolate what is possible and impossible. But when the limited tries to understand the unlimited, there's always setbacks, right? So we can accept it based on Shastra and also accept the fact that we'll never fully be able to wrap our intelligence around it completely. Is that okay? Thank you for that.
I was listening, Sadhguru, someone asked this question in very intricately, and he answered kind of the similar way everybody.
Yeah. It's a common question, and it's one that, you know, at the end of the day we just accept it happened, and Krishna has created this material world in a way that every living entity can very easily go back home back to Godhead. That is the greatest fortune. But again, it's our choice, our desire. It's up to us. Anything else?
It's small. I've also heard it said by, not just from like other sources, but like other devotees saying, bringing up a perspective that instead of a fall from the spiritual world, that the jiva has just always been in samsara, and that the jivas that are in the material world have never, the reason that they're not in the spiritual is they've never fully, I don't know, they explain it in various ways, but I was wondering like if that is also
eternally conditioned,
yeah,
and eternally liberated.
If that is also like a shastric, it's considered like, at least like within ISKCON, like a shastrically supported position.
Well, there's a small distinction. So the conditioned soul, never does it lose the potentiality to be perfected. No matter how fallen and how many millions of lifetimes the living entity may be, as you said, in samsara, in the material world, it never loses the potentiality to eternal. And there's a factual reason for it. And it's very scientific in reason. What is the spirit soul? What is the composition of the spirit soul? Where does it come from?
Part and parcel of Krishna.
It's part and parcel of Krishna. Which means the spirit soul is eternally pure. It is never contaminated. It is never degraded in its potential, in its potency, its power. It is simply covered. Conditioning means we have covered the spirit soul. Like a diamond. Here's the example of a diamond. If you put the diamond into mud and you pull out the diamond, you won't see sparkle. You won't see luster. But the potentiality of that diamond to shine and luster and sparkle has not been impacted in the least bit. All we have to do is remove the dust, the dirt. Right? So the spirit soul is conditioned. So when we say it is eternally conditioned, it is a sense that if the living entity remains in defiance or not accepting this position, it will remain here forever. But it is not condemned here eternally. Paramatma is sitting in the heart of every living entity, waiting for that living entity to express its desire, and when it does, it is right there to show the path back home, back to God. So that is an eternal fact. The eternally liberated are also there. Those who have never fallen subject to the material nature. Those are the eternal associates of Krishna. They have never fallen subject to Krishna. Sorry, to the material world. Now, the one comment you made that the living entity has never been in the spiritual world, right? That is technically not fully correct, because the living entity is eternally spiritual. So it originates in the spiritual world, because spirit doesn't exist in the material world without being placed into it. And if you get now very technical, we see at the beginning of creation, matter is agitated by Garnadaksha Vishnu. And then with his glance impregnates the material world with the living entities. The material world doesn't create the living entities. So the living entities originate. The point that you may have heard, and that the living entity, now this is where we get into beginning and not beginning.
Yeah.
Right? And this is where we can't wrap our mind completely around this. But that the living entity immediately expresses this desire to be separate from Krishna. And thus it ends up in the material world. So in one sense you can say it didn't live in the spiritual world for a period of time and then desire. So but it originates in the spiritual world because it's spirit. Everything in the material world is matter, and that matter comes from where? The spiritual world. Krishna, as his expansion, Mahavishnu, creates the Pradhan, the Mahatattva, all the different material elements. They're all coming from the spiritual world. So everything emanates from there. Not only us as spirit soul, but everything around us. So that's why how we understand that, yeah, it absolutely, certainly, we all came from the spiritual world. And that's why Prabhupada said, return back to Godhead. Back to Godhead means going back from where we came from. To Godhead means we're going to somewhere new. But back to Godhead implies that's where we started. Right? Otherwise you wouldn't say back to Godhead. Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else? Shall we read down the rest of them? Shila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai. So we'll read the translations one at a time, and then we can just go around and everyone can take one.
Thank you.
Jerry first? Go ahead.
Okay. Right. To the Supreme Lord, whose form is the embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge, and bliss, whose shark-shaped earrings are swinging to and fro, who is beautifully shining in the divine realm of Gokul, who, due to the offense of breaking the yogurt pot that his mother was churning into butter, and then stealing the butter that was kept hanging from a swing, is quickly running from the wooden grinding mortar in fear of Mother Yashoda, but who has been caught from behind by her, who ran after him with greater speed. To that Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
Seeing the whipping stick in his mother's hand, he is crying and rubbing his eyes again and again. With his two lotus hands, his eyes are filled with fear, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, which is marked with the lines of conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To this Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound, not with ropes, but with his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisance.
By such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy and is revealing to those devotees who are absorbed in his knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence that he is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Sri Damodara hundreds and hundreds of times.
O Lord, although you are able to give me all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for the boon of impersonal liberation, nor the highest liberation of eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon which may be obtained by executing the 9 processes of bhakti. O Lord, I simply wish that this form of yours as Bal Gopal in Vrindavan may ever be manifest in my heart. For what is the use of me of any other boon besides this?
O Lord, your lotus face which is encircled by locks of soft black hair, fingered red as kissed again and again by Mother Yashoda, and your lips are red like the bimba fruit. May this beautiful vision of your lotus face be ever manifested in my heart. Thousands and thousands of other benedictions are of no use to me.
O Supreme Godhead, I offer my obeisances unto you. O Damodar, O Ananta, O Vishnu, O Master, O my Lord, be pleased upon me. By showering your glances of mercy upon me, deliver this poor ignorant fool who is immersed in an ocean of worldly sorrows, and become visible to my eyes.
O Lord Damodar, just as the 2 sons of Kuvera, Manigriva and Nalakuvara, were delivered from the curse of Narada, and made into great devotees by you in your form as a baby, tied with rope to a wooden grinding mortar. In the same way, please give to me your own prema bhakti. I only long for this, and have no desire for any kind of liberation.
O Lord Damodara, I first of all offer my obeisances to the brilliantly effulgent rope which binds your belly. I then offer my obeisances to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and I offer all obeisances to you, the Supreme Lord, who displays unlimited pastime.
So anyone want to share how they feel, any particular line stand out to them, or any prayer? This is 8 verses by Satyabhata Muni. Is there anything anyone like to share their realizations or something that caught their attention in the translations?
It's not just Lord Krishna that you're praying to. I mean, between all the verses, they are looking at each and every aspect of that form. Be it the nails, be it the rope on the belly, be it anything. It's each and every component of his form is being revealed.
Yeah, it's very multifaceted. Any other things that struck you or caught your eye or ear?
How the Lord can be so powerful, but yet he's crying. And I just can't imagine his cute face crying. So that's
He's
it.
crying and rubbing his eyes again and again.
Oh my gosh, it breaks my heart.
Listen, I just think about happiness and luck of Mother Yashoda, and what kind of good karmas and spiritual knowledge she had to accumulate to get into this position. Because like some others, we would think, if we would have a Krishna as a child, we naturally will be in similar situation like Yashoda. We would feel that love, have that close relationship, but we don't have that collected, to be on the level of Mother Yashoda. So that's really amazing.
It's amazing that you see how Krishna is so loving that he accepts service in whatever way his devotee wants to serve him. If someone wants to be his mother, he'll reciprocate that way. If someone wants to be his friend, he'll reciprocate that way. Someone wants to be a lover, that way. Servant, he'll reciprocate. So he's always reciprocating with the desire and mood of his devotees. And it shows, so when Krishna tells us in Bhagavad Gita, surrender everything, surrender to me. You should remember, Krishna is surrendering everything to his devotees. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. And we see that very beautifully here. Right? He's taking the love of Mother Yashoda.
It reminds me of, in that conversation I was talking about, like one of the other things I talked about with my friend was that this kind of problem of the unity and plurality of God. Like you have all these forms that are all so different and so varied, and like why that is, and it seems like from what I understand that in this conception you can be more powerful than God in a sense, and that's a problem. And then I was about to like argue against that, but then I remembered this past time and this song was saying that, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's kind of exactly it. Through bhakti, of course,
Exactly.
through this reciprocal.
And that's the key, is that in the potency of bhakti, still Mother Yashoda was not able to bind Krishna. How many ropes she had to bring? Thousands of pieces of rope to tie a small boy? Because until Krishna allowed it, it was not going to happen. So still Krishna is in control.
Absolutely.
But he surrenders that through his mercy because of the bhakti, as he said, the love. But no one can subdue Krishna. But the love of his devotees, Krishna subdues himself to. So that's what we have to understand and reconcile those two facets, if we will. But it shows how powerful bhakti is, that Krishna becomes so happy that he gives his mercy to Mother Yashoda to complete. It says two things you need to subdue Krishna with your love. One is great determination, and two, the mercy of Krishna. It's still, Krishna must allow it, because we are never controlled. Anything else? Anybody else that struck them from this?
Steve Prabhu online said, I like the line that references his belly as the abode of the universe, the microcosm of the macrocosm.
Yeah, we can't comprehend how the belly, but that is one of our acharyas talk about why the ropes were too short. Because to bind something, you must be able to define its circumference, its perimeter, right? Basic science. In order to tie, you have to be able to, how you can define the perimeter of the universe. Because Krishna, in his abdomen is the whole of the universe. But we think, no, that's just figurative. No, it's actual. When Mother Yashoda peered into the mouth of Krishna, she saw the whole universe. So, oh no, she saw a painting or an image. No. The whole of the universe was within. Now our minds cannot comprehend that. How we can be outside, yet within at the same. Don't try. But it's a fact. So yes, his abdomen is the universe. I'm always struck by this, I simply wish that this form of yours as Radha Gopal may ever be manifest in my heart. For what is the use to me of any other boon? Right? So we can think about when we go and pray to Krishna, how many boons we ask for, how many different things we're praying for. But Satyavratamani knows none of that compares to simply having this form of yours be manifest in my heart. So intoxicatingly pleasing and blissful must be the beauty of Krishna that it never tires. So the more we see, the more happiness we get. Right? And so it gives us just a glimpse into how attractive Krishna must be and what is the real boon that we should aspire for. It's like in a child will go to a rich man and ask for a few chocolates. As an ignorant, not knowing, oh, you can get something much more, but to the child, chocolates are everything. Right? Halloween, yay! But, when we go to Krishna, we should know, what is it that we should really ask for? You can follow the great devotees and great sages who understood this. And he was saying, just make your form manifest. Anyone else? Alright, so shall we recite Damodarastakam and Bhagavad Gita? I think first we'll chant one round of japa and then we'll and then we'll sing Damodarastakam and Bhagavad Gita. Is that okay? Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.